everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Jacob. Today we got a good episode for you, and we're talking paranormal. I mean, probably some more things, besides that. But before we get to our guest this week, I want to tell you guys, about our podcast and where you can find us. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/conversations with Jacob on YT. Our Twitter is CWJ Podcast. Our podcasting platforms include sometimes, and we're on YouTube, and not all the time, but you can find us on Amazon Music, and we're on Audible, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, and about 20 other podcasting sites out there. It's hard to remember those. And if you got a question, a guest suggestion, or just want to just say hi, you can send it to our mailbag, conversationswithjacob@gmail.com. Our website is conversationswithjacobpodcast.weebly.com. There you can find about our upcoming episodes, past guests, and so much more. And we also got a merchandise store. If you want to buy a hoodie, t-shirt, whatever, then the links down below. And joining me today is Brandon Schexnayder. Hope I pronounced your name right.
Oh man, I appreciate it. Schexnayder, but
yeah, there you go. Yeah. But anyways, Brandon, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on today, Jacob. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I never seen nobody with an X in their name.
Oh, I got all the letters.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah. So, Brandon, I guess to start off, can you tell us, and can you give us a little background on yourself?
Sure. Yeah. We'll have a podcast called Southern Gothic. It is a show that kind of explores the dark history, ghost stories, and kind of historic true crimes of the old South, the American South. So tell a lot of stories. I'm a storyteller at heart, like telling ghost stories, stuff like that. I've been doing this podcast for about 5 years now, and it's done fairly well and enjoy doing it a lot. And like I said, I like telling ghost stories, man.
I like the paranormal. As a matter of fact, I might share some of my ghost stories here on this episode because I've had a few myself. But can you, I guess first question would be, as everybody always, kind of throws this question out there. Now this question is, with the ghost apps on phones, here's the question: are they real or are they fake?
Oh, I got a lot of opinions about a lot of these. I struggle to trust the ones on the phones. I'll be honest. I struggle with kind of ghost hunting in that kind of format. Anyway, I went on something recently. We were out at the McPike Mansion in St. Louis, or right outside of St. Louis in Alton, Illinois. And we were out there, and it was a group of about 20 people. It was kind of an event to come out to this thing, and somebody showed us around, and we were gonna, go looking for evidence and things of that nature. And we kind of went out to the spot where they believe that there was a family cemetery, but the headstones weren't there anymore, right? And we kind of go out to this spot. It's a really creepy spot out in the woods, right? And the gentleman who is kind of guiding us through the tour and kind of leading and showing some of the new people what to do and stuff like that. He's got an EMF reader and he kind of puts it down and he starts talking, to whatever spirit might be there to see if he can have some interaction. Like, hey, just tap that EMF reader if you hear it. The traditional kind of ghost hunt type talk, right? And and some of the other folks who were there, they all pull out their phones, their ghost tube apps and all, to see, what are they saying? What are they saying? And they all throw their phones down right in front of that EMF reader. And sure enough, that EMF reader, it starts going off because it's got phones around it, right? And everybody's kind of running off these phones and running off, thinking, oh man, now look at this and that. And it's just, those apps to me, I just struggle to believe that the programming in the app and that little microphone and all of that is really doing something of that nature. Now, maybe you can prove me wrong. We've all got our own kind of opinions about the paranormal and what they can do for sure. But I don't really buy into the phones all that much, to be honest.
Oh yeah. I've had a few on my phone, and just kind of get iffy about it because if you download it, then that app can take your information and kind of put it into the app, and then you get things, and then people is like scared or shocked about it. That's what I think they do. They take your name, put it into the device,
Right.
and that's the way it's done. Can you tell us about the Ouija boards?
Oh man, I don't touch those. I'll be honest. I
Yeah.
uh I no, I'm not a Ouija board guy at all. I've definitely stayed away from those. Um, Most of what I like to do is I like to go visit places, and some of these places, they don't really want you to bring things of that nature. So, I went out to Waverly Hills not too long ago, a few months back, and this old sanatorium up in Louisville, Kentucky, and I mean they make it very clear. I mean, no tarot cards, Ouija boards, nothing kind of that nature. So I've kind of shied away from them, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Can you tell us one of the scariest, was I guess ghost stories that you've encountered?
One that I've encountered. I don't think I've ever been truly afraid in anywhere that I've gone. But I will say that the times when you do have an interaction that feels genuine, it does feel like the kind of thing that just runs through you, top to bottom. It's the kind of thing of where I live right now. It's called Franklin, Tennessee. It's right outside of Nashville. It's an old Civil War town. There's a battle here where 10,000 people died, went missing, or were wounded in the period of about 4 hours, right? 4 or 5 hours. So massive casualties, absolutely devastated the town here. So we have these ghost tours that kind of go through this small downtown area, and there's this one spot at the very end that is incredibly active, and folks see things in the windows all the time. Folks that go up on the porch, they just feel, the anxiety, they feel the dread of being on the property, just a lot of different people. Usually it's kind of like younger women will get really upset there and feel like, and I've been there before where I've really felt that anxiety and I felt like the skin come up on the back, but it's never been an event. It's been this overall sensation that you need to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
It's never been like something where I necessarily saw something and then immediately was shook, and so I haven't had one of those yet, but I would love to. I mean, I grew up on horror movies. Come on, y'all bring it, right?
Now, do you think that the grounds like that and maybe Gettysburg that they've got some kind of activity going on?
I think if you look at what a spirit might be, and if it's something that lingers due to trauma, then absolutely, right? I mean, if there is anywhere where you could possibly have massive trauma like that happen, it's going to be a battlefield, especially one like Gettysburg or Franklin here. To have that many dead bodies, have that many people, just the fear was probably so palpable that day. I imagine when I come up here without ghosts or anything, if I go visit over there, one of the battlefields is a park. When you go over there and you can just sit there and just imagine 20,000 men walking across this field and just walking straight into fire. I mean, how could those people, if there are spirits anywhere, you would imagine it would be there with that immense trauma and emotion building up. So, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, and when did your interest of the paranormal come to be?
Sure. Well, I'm New Orleans born and raised. So I kind of grew up kind of with a little bit of offbeat vibe anyway, right? But as kids, my sister and I, our parents drug us to cemeteries. They were genealogists, very, very much into genealogy. And so we spent a lot of time in cemeteries. And I think just being in New Orleans, being in cemeteries, my early career was in music up here in Nashville. So I hung out with a lot of country storytellers, that songwriting storyteller types. And I think those things just kind of all merged together and really, really got me a little deeper into it, right?
All right. Now, is there such things as demon spirits?
I won't give you a definitive answer on any of it. I feel like if there's anything I know, it's that I don't know anything. I, right after saying I don't believe in ghost tube apps, right? But the look, I have my beliefs as to what spirits are have evolved so frequently over the past few years, over the years in general, in different ways. And lately, the feeling that I get is, have you ever heard of the trickster in the paranormal? I have this kind of belief that it's this that maybe there's just this one entity that's just messing with us all,
Yeah.
and maybe not an entity per se, but maybe there's just this one underlying beyond the veil type thing that is just manifesting in ways that we understand, and that maybe it's not, maybe it is. I mean, it's a trickster. Maybe it is demonic. Maybe it's not. So I've tend to, for some reason, I'm just leaning more towards this, and I think it's always come from this concept of how you'll go to one of these historic houses like I was talking about earlier, and it's always like the man of the house who shows up, or it's always, there's always a story, and it's this is the person you're interacting with. Meanwhile, this house has been there for 200 years, and dozens of people have lived there, and certainly that there are reasons for some of these other people to show up as well. Why if I go to President Andrew Jackson's house, do I meet President Andrew Jackson when he had 300 enslaved people on the property as well, right? So I lean less towards demons, or even I'm finding myself currently entertaining this new kind of perspective of the paranormal might be something a little different,
No, absolutely. Now, can like spirits or ghosts, can they hurt us? Because people always say, well, the dead can't hurt us, but the living can. So, can ghosts make us kind of hurt our own selves?
Well, you heard the Bell Witch, right? You ever heard
Yeah.
the Bell Witch? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the classic tale. It's the only documented tale where a spirit actually murdered a living person, purportedly, right? And that's right up the road from me. It's probably about an hour and a half north of Nashville up there. The Bell Witch. It was a poltergeist. It was a poltergeist. It was supposedly a woman who was living next door to the Bell family back in the early 1800s. They had outsettled this piece of land out there in the 1800s, and I guess there was a land dispute or something, and this woman decided that she was going to go after the family, and did so in death as well, and was kind of a modern poltergeist. But she poisoned John Bell, and that's what it came down to. She tormented this family forever, and then inevitably one day she poisoned John Bell. Now, whether or not that's really is the only instance or not, I don't know. I think that's another one. It's one that's a little out of my purview. I think the Bell Witch story has a lot of accuracy in it, and I think there's a lot of um, real creepy things in there that really happened. Whether or not the spirit did that or not, whether or not a spirit could do that now. Maybe I don't want to find out. Maybe that's the real answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts on like the mythical creatures or like the urban legends out there?
Sure. Well, I'm a Bigfoot believer, hands
Yeah.
down. I mean, terrestrial, that is like some kind of, I mean, I'm a Bigfoot guy. I mean, I don't do anything with, I just like watching the TV shows. I don't study that or get, that's like a side hobby, right? Aside from I don't ever get involved in Bigfoot stuff. But when it comes to cryptids, I think that there's such a differentiation between, there are cryptids that I do believe are like Bigfoot, that are terrestrial beings that are misunderstood. And I think that there are, at the same time, there's cryptids that have just been folklore that have come down through the ages. And we have, back where I'm from, we have a cryptid called the Rougarou. Have you ever heard the Rougarou?
I have. Yeah,
It's
I have.
swamp werewolf, if you will. And the Cajuns, they believed in the Rougarou. They believed that this was, again, it's just a swamp werewolf. That's the best way to put it, right? But what they did, if you know anything about the way the Cajuns came to the swamps, is the Cajuns were French people, and they lived in Canada, and actually lived in Canada for several generations. Then, after I believe, oh gosh, I can't, I'm slipping my mind now. The war in the 1700s, 7 Years' War. Well, I can't remember. Anyway, basically, Britain eventually took over the land where the Cajun people were up in the Acadian coast up there. And so the Cajun people didn't know where to go. They leave Canada. They want to go back. They try and go back to France. And then they end up in Louisiana because that's French at that point, right? So here are these people. They've been living in Canada. They have French ancestry. Now they're down in the swamps of all places, right? Like, what do you? How do you? I mean, and we're not even talking good land. I mean, it's out. That is swamp country out there. It is dark. It is humid. It is full of mosquitoes and God knows what else out there. So here's these folks who've come from this French tradition where there are werewolves. That was very much a large 17th century piece of folklore for French people. And they get to the swamp and something down there scared the living hell out of them. Who knows what it was? Or maybe it was, your papa was trying to warn you to not go in the woods. I don't know. But they created this new kind of monster that now lived there in the swamp that was just as tied to their old folklore as anything else. And so when I think a lot about when we talk about cryptids, I like to say I believe in Bigfoot. I mean, 100% terrestrial creature is living out there versus the Rougarou, where maybe there is something out there that freaked him out, but the Rougarou itself really is this product of kind of cultural folklore. So, yeah.
Now, and why do you think that Bigfoot or like these other creatures haven't been found?
I think I think the world is bigger than we realize. I
Yeah.
think that if you've ever flown over the Pacific Northwest going out to Seattle or something and you look down, I mean, how we could ever be so proud to believe that we have, seen everything down there is a little it's a little cocky. I mean, same thing with ghost stuff, right? If I'm going to sit here and tell you I know if there's demons or not, well, I'm just some long hair kid out here in Tennessee. I don't what do I know? So yeah, that's ultimately, and we talk a lot of I mean it's easy for folks to look down the ocean and say, "Oh, there's uncharted, there's all this in the ocean we don't know about." But nobody wants to admit it about land. And man, what is it? Some of those guys say that there's probably only 300 Bigfoot in the country, and if you'd go out there in those that wilderness, man, I don't know. It could be out there.
Absolutely. Now, and what's one of the ghost stories and that you know, what's one of the ghost stories and that you've heard that you probably couldn't believe that was true?
Couldn't believe. I mean, I do that a lot. I'm not gonna lie. I struggle with it. With what I do is I focus primarily, like I said, my show's called Southern Gothic, so I focus primarily on the South. And because of that, what I end up seeing is I go to a lot of small towns frequently and research, right? And so I end up seeing the same stories pop up over and over again because culturally these all these cities were kind of the same. So if I was studying all across the United States, all across the world, I'd be grabbing kind of big stories here or there. But instead, I'm in this kind of this place where I can see patterns a lot more clearly. Um, and there's this one particular kind of story that Southerners really like. For some reason, they really enjoy ghost brides. Okay. They like dead brides. I don't know why, but it's just over and over and over again. You go to a small town, you might hear about a woman who, died on her wedding day, died before wedding, something like that. So, you got like there's one like out in Taylortown, Louisiana. There's a tower out there. It's outside of Shreveport, and it's a story. Basically, a church burned down, and they say if you go and you look up at the top of that tower up there, you can see this woman who's crying, and she's just wailing away about. And the story goes that her dad built this church for her wedding day, and she was a rich planter's daughter, and then of course the husband doesn't or the fiance doesn't show up, and she's waiting in this tower over and over and waiting and waiting and waiting, and then finally somebody shows up and says the husband's dead, to which she throws herself down the stairs and kills herself. And the dad decides to torch the church because of it, right? And so, very typical tale. I mean, we get it all over. I've got stories. Alexandria has one. There's called the Bellamy Bridge has one. That's just very typical story of a bride dying on her wedding day from a broken heart. There's even some that are real. If you go out to Chapel of the Cross in Mississippi, there's a real one there called the Bride of Annandale. A woman, she um, it was the same kind of deal. She got engaged, she got married, she's everything's getting going. Her husband to be is down in New Orleans, a man by the name of Henry Vick. He's preparing for the wedding, buying a suit or something, right? Well, he never comes back. And so they end up, the wedding becomes a funeral. And so now we have this poor woman. She didn't kill herself in this instance. That's how you know it's real. It wasn't quite as over dramatic. She lives a long life, but folks say she's still sitting in that cemetery mourning that gentleman there. So, so I see a lot of this, and I'll come full circle to it about how I don't believe it's real, because when you start seeing these similar pieces, it really forces you to question stuff more. If I see the same story in different places and see the same hallmark signs, it really forces you to question. And I have one here in Franklin that it was on all the ghost tours, like all the kind of haunted, when folks would come in town and take the ghost tour. And it was honestly like one of the more fun ones that people talked about. There's this little right now it's an art gallery down there on the edge of town. It's called Gallery 202, and this historic property. It was called Clouston Hall. A man by the name of Edward Clouston built this place. Really, he absolutely did. In 1820, he built this place. Well, the story was for the longest time that he built this place. It was supposed to be just like his in-town after church brunch spot. Beautiful mansion, of course, right? And he's just gonna entertain here, and he's gonna do it for his daughter's wedding, and he wants this thing done in time for his daughter's wedding. So just instant like clue right there. We got another. If we're gonna bring a wedding into this, somebody's gonna die here. And anyway, so he goes and they invite everybody in town for this big beautiful wedding. The church is done up down the road, everything. Edward and his wife go to bed that night. Everybody's asleep in this place, and they in the middle of the night they hear this awful sound, and they walk out on the balcony and they look down and they realize that their daughter, the bride to be the next day, had hung herself from the stairwell. And so since that time, folks have claimed to see her. Folks have seen pictures of her and all those things. But almost immediately when I heard the story, it just made me go look at a census record, only to find that in 1820, he didn't even have a family yet. He didn't even get married until about 10 years later. He didn't even have a daughter old enough to hang herself, or to even get married, even for that matter, until after he had sold this property anyway. So, so when you see some of these elements, it really kind of clues you in. Now, at the same time, I'm with this property, even that I'm talking about, I'm saying that this story isn't real, and I don't believe the story. But this was also a field hospital following that Civil War battle. So, does that mean the place is haunted? I mean, or not haunted? I mean, absolutely not. This place would be chock full of energy if it were. But the story that we tell, those are usually triggers, and that's what I enjoy doing the most, is really diving into the stories. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I was going to ask the question. Okay, here we go. I forgot the question, but it came back to me. For people that does try to communicate with ghosts, should they not try to provoke them?
That's a hot topic there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's right.
Yeah, I know a lot of people. To each his own. I mean, I think if you're really going after the whole provoke thing, I mean, if I was a ghost, would I show up for you? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think different people have different techniques. I think people have different ways of trying to get some type of communication. I don't use that method. That's not something I'm interested in doing. So, but if you want to go try, go for it, man.
Yeah. Now, and have you ever had a ghost or spirit and follow you home?
No, I haven't, but I just heard this awful story from some friends of mine. The woman who plays guitar for me when I do live shows, she was telling us her and her twin sister went to Waverly Hills and brought something home with them, and for about 6 months were absolutely tormented, and they had no idea. They didn't even connect it at first, where they had kind of come in, or they'd just been living their life, and all of a sudden something started to smell in the house, and the smell just grew, and other people would come and they wouldn't smell the smell. when the people came over, the smell was gone, but yet they could, one of them couldn't even sleep in a room anymore and just had this horrible tale and had to get people come out and, they start looking back and they're like, oh no, you must have brought this home. So I wasn't scared of it even for a while. I always thought that might be a little more fanciful thing. Um, but after talking to my friends, recently about their experience, I think you need to be a little more careful, you know.
All right. And what is the scariest story that you've heard from someone?
The scariest. Um, oh gosh. I mean, I've heard some pretty stereotypical with things being mean and things slamming doors and scaring people. Honestly, that one about the one that my friends kind of told me about with the smell. Right now, that one's more fresh in my mind because it wasn't such a traditional ghost story, right? It was something as they were described. They found somebody to come and help them get rid of it, and that was a soul, that was a mean entity whose entire purpose was to just make you miserable. And this person told them, said, hey, like they didn't need to, they've got all the time in the world, they don't know what time is, they can just sit here and gradually gnaw at you and make you depressed and miserable for months before you even realize what it's doing. And I think the idea and the concept behind something like that scares me more than something coming home and showing itself, or something, blatantly poltergeist, like in an instant that you can react and deal with. But so yeah, that's probably what scares me the most. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so would you say that if someone wants to contact a ghost, would you say that a cemetery would be like a better option?
I don't know.
Well,
I mean, I think that there are more. I think there's options everywhere you go. I think that we narrow ourselves down way too much to these haunted tourist locations. So like I kind of started off saying, I went to McPike Mansion. There's 20 people there. There was no way I was gonna interact with anything paranormal when I got 20 people running around with spirit boxes and EMFs and phones and maybe a little, maybe not, but like versus, look, you go to your grandma's house, man. How long's that house been there? So I don't know which one to really, experiences come anywhere, but I would not narrow it down to just historically haunted places. Yeah.
absolutely. Now, of course, like I said earlier, was I got my own ghost stories. I lived in a house, two-story house, kitchen on the bottom, then the living room stuff on the top. And there was a story. Don't know how true it is, but the owner or someone claimed that a witch lived there, and she was doing this stuff, and some spirit or force pushed her down the steps, and she died. And when we lived there, you could hear people walking up the steps. You could hear voices, which was and that day which I learned that spirits can mock people's voices.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
There really made me a believer. And also another story, which did happen recently, 2021, was my grandma passed away in 2021, and after the funeral home came and all of that and took her on, and we was all in the kitchen at my aunt's place, and we heard a door open. The thing is, the door was locked. So there said, oh, I said, I don't know about all of this now. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's what made me a believer, which I still believe in it. So which I know there is like which I don't want to say ghosts, but more like spirits out there.
Yeah. Most of the people I talk to, it either comes from they grew up in a house that was haunted, or they had some type of experience with a relative that had passed. That
Yeah,
seems to be the two main things that draw interest in. Yeah.
absolutely. Now, can you tell us about your podcast?
Sure. Yeah. Well, what I do is I tell ghost stories. I basically tell ghost stories, And then I kind of break it down. I look at kind of like I was talking about a few minutes ago about kind of just the cultural relevance, maybe a little bit, with the historical nature of it, maybe the mystery surrounding it. I don't go either way, whether it's true or false necessarily. Like I said, this place could still be haunted, but let's dive into the story that people talk about and the existence of the story. So it's called Southern Gothic. Go to places all over the South, do those ghost stories, haunted places. We've covered the Bell Witch, Waverly Hills, all those places like I talked about earlier, as well as a little bit of just kind of darker history, some true crime, some old true crime, and things of that nature. So, and you can, of course, hear that on any of the podcast apps.
Uh, well, there you go. All right, Brandon. It's been fun talking to you. But before we go, is there anything you want to tell the audience listening?
No, no, you guys keep on searching for those ghosts though, and come out, come out, check out Southern Gothic sometime. We'd love to have y'all as a listener.
Oh yeah, of course. Oh, I might check it out myself. Anyways, Brandon, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast to talk a little bit about the paranormal. It was an honor to have you on.
Thank you for having me, Jacob.
Oh yeah, of course. But anyways, and that's it for this episode of Conversations with Jacob. Tune in next week for a brand new episode. Until then, and we'll see you guys down the road.